far right and Germany are two things that sound pretty scary when you put them together. This is why, even though Angela Merkel has won the elections with a high margin, it has been a bittersweet victory. The fact that Alternative for Germany, a xenophobic, ultra-conservative party, has become the third largest political force is bad enough to make Merkel rather uneasy.
We don't need to beat around the bush. We wanted a better result, that is clear. Angela Merkel.
Here at VisualPolitik, we plan to do a video this week about Germany, but the current news forced us to postpone that video so we could have time to prepare this one, explaining what Alternative for Germany, or AfD as it's known in Germany, is all about. And yes, I probably know what you're thinking right now. You're probably thinking, come on Simon, how could you not predict that the far right would be a big hit in Germany? Because, well, at the end of the day, xenophobic parties, they're pretty much in fashion all across Europe. Plus, AfD did great in previous local elections. Nevertheless, most of the polls said that Germans love moderation above all else, and that's not just the electoral polls talking, but also sociological studies. For instance, while in France only 50% of the population places themselves on the center of the spectrum, this number in Germany is as high as 76%. Further, Germans have many reasons to be happy. They almost didn't suffer at all during the economic crisis, and now their economy is doing better than ever. Salaries are rising, there's almost full employment, and companies export abroad as if there was no tomorrow. So the big question here becomes, who votes for the far right wing in Germany? And most important of all, what does Alternative for Germany want? Are they really a radical party, or is the media exaggerating? Well, today we're going to answer all of those questions, but as usual before we get started, let's have a look at the history.
Party on the divide.
Yes, it is true. Today, Alternative for Germany, they are a populist political party with a big focus on rejecting immigrants and refugees. Specifically, they want to reject those who come from Islamic countries. But despite all of this, its origins couldn't be more different than what it is today. Let's go back to the year 2013. Now, back then, all the European media talked about was the debt crisis that was happening in countries like Spain, Italy, and especially Greece. Now, in case you don't know the history here, let's have a quick summary. Before 2008, German banks invested a lot of money in lending to companies and governments in the south of Europe. And after the financial crisis of 2008, these countries couldn't give the money back. In fact, they needed even more cash so that they could afford their current spending. This included things like the salaries of civil servants, highways, and hospitals. And as you can imagine, paying day-to-day spending with debt, it's a far from ideal situation. So this is where Angela Merkel comes along and says, alright guys, I'm going to lend you the money, I will even let you give it back whenever you want, but you've got to make some reforms to your economic systems. These reforms, they were known as austerity.
Germany, alongside with other northern European countries, wanted to lend money to Italy, Spain, and Greece, while at the same time demanding some budget cuts so that these countries would no longer need to borrow as much money in the future, and so that they could pay back their debts.
Those conditions, they were seen as pretty draconian by most of those southern European countries. They were asking the question, well, who's Germany to tell us how we should spend our money? Meanwhile, some Germans, they were also pretty mad at their government. I mean, they were thinking, who are you, Merkel, to go around giving money to everyone? This is the European Union, not an NGO. Now, among those angry Germans, there were three famous economists: Alexander Gauland, Bern Luck, and Konrad Adam. These were the founders of the party Electoral Alternative 2013, which would later become Alternative for Germany. Many of these first supporters were bankers and university professors from the western part of Germany, cities like Frankfurt, Cologne, and Bonn. And do remember this because it's going to become really important later on. Now, in their electoral manifesto, they suggested that Germany should leave the euro and go back to the German mark. And, well, why was that? Well, this is because they believed that they could avoid bailouts to poorer economies by doing so, and, even more importantly, they could protect their economy from a likely devaluation of the euro. As we've said in previous videos, Germany's success was partly due to their strong currency. But Spain and Greece, they were pushing the European Central Bank to print more money so that they could pay their debts back. And as you probably know, economists, they thought that was a pretty bad idea.
The first stereotypical AfD voters weren't like the stereotype of an extreme right-wing hooligan. They were considered to be businessmen, economists, and university teachers. This is why the media started calling this party the, quote, Teachers' Party, and why they couldn't win a single MP during the federal elections of 2013.
I mean, think about it. Monetary policy is not exactly a sexy topic for an electoral campaign. I mean, pretty much only you guys who are watching this video care about that kind of topic. Nonetheless, the fate of Alternative for Germany was to change in July of 2015. At that moment, the economist Bernd Luck was the chairman, but the brand new leader, Frauke Petry, she had other plans. Unlike the previous leaders, Petry came from the eastern part of the country, and this means she brought a totally different political culture. For her, monetary policy, deficit and fiscal responsibility wasn't really that important. Instead, she knew there was a big niche of voters who wanted an iron fist on things like immigration and national identity. Besides, these kind of suggestions would give her the support of other leaders like Nigel Farage from Britain's UKIP party, Marine Le Pen from the National Front in France, and of course our favourite politician and the VisualPolitik mascot. Yes, my dear viewer, of course we are talking about the one and only
leader of Germany's far right-wing party meets Putin allies in Moscow.
I know, Vladimir Putin is an ever-popular topic here at VisualPolitik, but I mean, how can we resist talking about him? Now, during this time, thousands of refugees from Syria, Iraq, and Libya, they came to Germany, and Angela Merkel, she welcomed them with arms wide open. And, well, some Germans, they didn't really like this. So in the regional elections of 2016, Alternative for Germany launched an electoral platform which had nothing to do with what the founders had in mind at the beginning. This is why many of those economists, they jumped ship, among them Bernd Luck, who was the first president.
This party has fallen irretrievably into the wrong hands. Bernd Lucke.
Since then, Alternative for Germany has had two factions fighting each other. On the one hand, we have the people left over from the first group, but they are less and less important every day, and on the other hand, we have those who came under the leadership of Frauke Petry. This new political structure, it does mean more voters, but it also means more problems.
The AfD's current crisis was triggered in mid-January through a taboo-breaking speech by right-winger Björn Höcke, who in a beer hall in Dresden called for a 180-degree turn in Germany's culture of remembering and atoning for the Nazi era.
Regardless of how far right-wing you want to be, these kind of things, they're not really cool in Germany. And this created many problems for Mrs. Petry.
There are some investigations open because, apparently, some of the proposals on her program might be illegal. Remember that German law is made to avoid any resurgence of Nazism. The issues in this party are big enough that even Frauke Petry herself had to resign one day after this last election due to infighting with some of the more extreme factions of the party.
Nevertheless, with or without the unfortunate quotes and the internal division, Alternative for Germany has become the big surprise from this election. So the question now becomes, well, who voted for them? Well, let's take a look at this.
History of two Germanys.
For the past few years, the German economy has been on fire. Salaries are growing, companies are exporting, and inequality is almost non-existent. Well, actually, just hold on for a moment, because that last bit, it's not exactly sure. Now, of course, there is almost no poverty on the streets, and there are factories all over the country, but when we look at the income distribution by regions, do you see a clear division? If you pay attention to this map, you'll see a blue part and a red part. The blue part is the wealthiest, the red part is the poorest. The blue part is what used to be Western Germany, and the red part is what used to be Eastern Germany, Communist Germany. That eastern part of the country is the Germany that went capitalist in 1989, but still doesn't have the same standard of living as the West. If you visit a city like Dresden in Eastern Germany, you will see lots of construction going on. Most of the buildings, they were completed just a couple of years ago. This is indicative that the reunification of Germany, it's still very much an ongoing process. Now, of course, if we compare the standard of living of an Eastern German with a Greek or a Spaniard, it doesn't look that bad. But Germans, they like to be compared with other Germans. And when you do that, things look way worse.
Schwedt doesn't have enough industrial opportunity, and it lacks proper educational facilities. A large sport and cultural center aren't enough to keep people from leaving the city. It's dead quiet in the town center. Young people have left in droves for bigger cities in the west. A sculpture on the riverbank mirrors the city's troubled hopes for the future.
In this city, the city of Schwedt, Alternative for Germany got over 20% of the votes, and a little further south in the state of Saxony, most people are voting for the far right. But hold on a minute, because we're not just talking about the economy here, we're talking about a totally different culture. Think about it, East Germans lived for entire generations under a totally different political system. This means a different education, a different lifestyle, and different values. Here, moderation, it's not really a good thing. In fact, the left-wing party Die Linke gets most of its votes in eastern Berlin.
But there's more than that. While Western Germans spent decades remembering their Nazi past, the government of the Democratic Republic of Germany tried to create a new sense of national pride.
So when an AfD candidate says that we must appreciate the courage of the German soldiers during World War II, Germans from Cologne are frightened, but Germans from Leipzig say, well, okay, whatever. Alright, but now there is a really important question. Why is Eastern Germany so much against refugees and immigrants? Well, many of you might think this is because they are tired of Muslims who don't want to integrate into their culture, right? Well, here comes a number that is going to absolutely blow your mind. There are 9 million immigrants living in Germany, and less than 500,000 live in East Germany. And when you really think about it, this makes total sense. I mean, those who move to Germany, they want to be in the wealthiest regions. So if you walk down the streets of Dresden, you're hardly ever going to see a woman covering her head with a hijab. And then guess who is the biggest immigrant community in Eastern Germany? Well, surprise, surprise, that would be the Russians. More than half of the immigrants living on this side of the country come from the land of Putin. And of course, they are the biggest audience for German Russia today. And, well, this explains things like this.
AfD deploys double-headed eagle to snare Russian-German voters.
So now the question becomes, do you think Alternative for Germany can keep growing in the next election, or will its internal divisions end up destroying the party? And what do you think this party can achieve over the next 4 years? Please do let us know in the comments section below. Meanwhile, if you want to know why Germany is the world's factory, do click on this video, and also remember to visit the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this video that are not mine, and as always, we publish new videos every Monday and Thursday, so hit that subscribe button and you will not miss any of those videos. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.